All right, as promised, my guest is on the line. She called in right on time. She's my first guest of 2018. And she's the daughter, granddaughter, sister, friend, and student are some of the hats that Leah Forney wears. A native of Queens, New York, who is currently residing in South Carolina, writing and speaking came naturally to her. Leah Forney is the oldest girl of 6 siblings. She grew up without her mother and father raising her. She learned early on the importance of having a relationship with Jesus Christ from her maternal grandmother, who raised her in the church. Leah's love for writing came at a young age when she would pen poems to release the pain she felt from not having her parents in her life. Never knowing where her writings would take her, Leah penned her first book. Leah has lent her voice in numerous projects, from being a sexual assault awareness advocate to acting in her church's drama ministry. As she continues to accept the calling that God has placed on her life, Leah is open to seeing where her gifts and talents will take her. She released her first book, Unapologetically Me, Living, Owning, and Walking in My Truth, on April 1st, 2017. She has started a community-based project called Project Give Back, which was created to help meet the needs of those in her community. She can do it all. She has a heart for service, and you can follow Leah on many social media sites, including Facebook, Leah M. Forney, Instagram, I am Leah Michelle, and LinkedIn, Leah Forney. Leah, I'm on all of those, so certainly you'll be seeing me to hit friend requests before the day is out. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we have Leah Forney on the line. She is the author of Unapologetically Me, Living, Owning, and Walking in My Truth. All right, so I'll tell you, before we even get started, I'm going to give big shout outs to Linda Miller. I know Linda's listening. Linda actually introduced Leah and I, because Linda would come to me. She calls in every now and again, and she lets me know every Sunday when she sees me that she heard the show the day before. She's one of my faithful listeners. But Linda came to me and said, I know I have some author friends. I was like, great. So she gave me Leah's name. I reached out to Leah, and then before you knew it, Leah wound up being my first show for 2018. So thank you for rising. You're in South Carolina, you said?
I am.
What part?
In a small town called Walterboro.
Oh, Walterboro. Okay, now.
It's a little country town.
I am familiar with South Carolina for a lot of different reasons. So let's see, Walterboro, I'm familiar with Bishopville.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, so that's Florence, Lucknow. You're telling me I'm trying to think of some of the other places down there. You got Columbia, of course, the capital. Where's Walterboro in relation to like some of those places?
So Walterboro is like smack dab in the middle. So like I'm an hour away from Columbia going north, and then I'm an hour away from Charleston going south. So I'm like smack dab in the middle. Okay,
so you're past Columbia?
Yeah, going south. So
going south. Okay, so you're not, let me see, my mother lives in Louisville. She's not too far from Augusta, Georgia. So you're somewhere going in that area then?
Yep.
Ah, okay. So I got a feel for where you are. Like I said, I know South Carolina well. And so, all right. So you're not too far from my mom then, because my mom, like I said, she's in Louisville, which is about 30 miles from Augusta. And Augusta, I know, is only an hour and a half from Columbia.
Yep.
Okay, so you're in between Columbia and Augusta. All right, well, welcome to the Reading Circle. All right, we talked a little bit on yesterday. I told you I really don't have any set questions. I just kind of go with the flow. But usually my first question, you kind of touched on it in your bio, is where did the writing begin? Is that something you did in grade school, grammar school, high school? I mean, where did the whole thing begin?
Yeah, I actually did it as a child. So I would probably say I was probably about maybe 8 or 9 when I first started writing. And like I said in my bio, I just used to write poems, and sometimes I would even write letters to God, really trying to understand why I had to be the different kid compared to my friends. So writing really was just natural for me. I would write all the time. It was my way of kind of expressing that pain of not growing up with mom, not growing up with dad, realizing, at a young age that I was different. I wasn't like my friends in the neighborhood. I wasn't like my friends at school who had both parents. I had neither. And so writing started at a young age for me.
So when you say different, you're talking about the fact that you did not have your parents. So, because I work in a school, and many, if not the bulk or the majority of my children are growing up in single parent homes. They have mom most of the time. Every now and again, I'll get a dad single family home, but most of the time it's a mother's single family home. Dad's nowhere in the picture. So, but in your case, you're saying you had neither.
Correct.
So when you say different, I mean, how did that play with you? In other words, how did you know you were different? What made you know you were different from your other friends?
I think the biggest thing was, at my schools, we would have like father-daughter dances and just things centered around like, parents, and not being able to participate in those types of events, not being able to go to father-daughter dance because I don't have a dad or I don't have a father figure in my life. Not being able to be picked up from school by mom and dad. My grandmother, she raised me and my brother and my sister, the first three of us. Unfortunately, the last three were adopted by some other families. But, just realizing like, okay, I don't come home to mom and dad like my friends do. I can't really talk about my mother and father to my friends because I don't really know them. So it was just little things at a young age that made me realize I'm different. I'm not like everybody else.
Now, that's interesting to me, and I'll tell you why, because I would, from a psychological standpoint or what was going on in your mind, because having gone through a divorce, and I know how my children reacted to it, and then having or being able to see on a daily basis what goes on in the homes of many of my students, I'm convinced that the whole family structure, whenever something goes awry, such as a divorce, a separation, death, so forth and so on, that it really does play on, in particular, because I'm not saying it doesn't play on the adult minds, but certainly on the children's minds, it is like traumatic. What was kind of like going on in your mind whenever you were thinking in terms of like the father-daughter dances or whatever where parents would be involved? What would that do for you on the inside?
Oh, that was devastating. And I think the biggest devastation of it all was really like my grandmother. At the time, I didn't look at it as her protecting or shielding me. I just looked at it like she was kind of in secrecy, because I could recall at a young age, going to get a checkup from the doctor, and they asked about my parents, and my grandmother was kind of like, we'll talk about that in private. So not really having those answers, not really knowing what happened, what was going on, it was definitely devastating to me, because I'm like, okay, I understood that I got here through mom and dad, but where are they? And so it wasn't until I was in my teens really that my grandmother even had that conversation, and it was like, listen, your mom has been on drugs since you were 2 years old. Your dad has been in and out of prison since you were 9. This is why grandma took you and your siblings in. But prior to that conversation, it was, okay, I know I'm different. I'm feeling unloved because I'm like, where is mom and dad? I don't really have no answers, because at the time, my grandmother is like, I got to protect her. She's too young. She doesn't need to know. So I'm going through my adolescent years still trying to figure out where mom and dad is, why they weren't there. So now we got anger building up. We got resentment building up, because now I feel abandoned. And I'm trying to figure out why nobody won't tell me the truth.
How did that play out in terms of you behavior wise, or did it be? And the reason I'm asking again is because I have some angry children in my school, and a lot of them, many of them are in your exact same situation. Mom, it could be the reverse or the exact same. One is on drugs, one is in prison. One is dead, one is in prison. One is dead, one is on drugs. I mean, I have children that are suffering through the same thing that you've suffered through. And I know some of the behavior challenges and issues that they give us. Did it do anything for you behaviorally?
I would say that I was a very emotional kid. So I was the kid that the littlest things would set me off. And like you, I too currently work in the school system on the mental health side, and I see it all the time as well. Actually, one of my clients at 6, he's already got that very emotional response to things. So I was a very, very emotional kid. The littlest things would set me off. Eventually, it did turn into anger where I would get into fights a lot. And I can recall my grandmother being so scared for me because I was the kid that started fighting. And she would be so scared for me. And I can recall her telling me, like, Leah, we got to get that anger under control. We got to get it under control because you're going to end up one or two places. Either you're going to end up in jail or you're going to end up dead. Because you set me off, I was fighting. And I didn't care if I hurt you, didn't hurt you. I was that kid. So, yeah, definitely behavioral-wise, I learned to kind of use that as some fuel to show people, like, I'm not one to mess with.
So now, in your particular case, did you know your parents and then they disappeared, or you never knew them?
So in my case, I never knew them. Like, I knew of them. I could tell you, at the time, I could tell you who my mom was. I could tell you her name. I've seen pictures. Same for my dad. My dad, he was in my life for at least the first 9 years. And even after my mom left, like, he would still come around and still try to come see me and my sister. And then he hooked up with another woman, had children by her, and she pretty much was like, listen, it has to be me and my kids, and you need to leave your ex-baby mama's kids alone.
Wow.
And so he made that choice. And then it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I reunited with my father and my father's side of the family, because I had no way to contact anybody on that side. And again, I think that my grandmother who raised me had the information. I think she was so in protective mode.
Of course.
You know, that it was kind of like, I don't know if I want you to go down this path. And so it wasn't really until I was about 24 years old that I had that talk with my grandmother, and I was kind of like, Grandma, listen, I need to know. Like, I need to know. I know this is going to be like opening up Pandora's box because a lot's going to come at me, but I need to know. And so at 24 was probably when she was like, okay, I think you're ready to handle it. Like, I think that you're strong enough to handle what's going to come. And so She gave me the blessing, and she gave me my great-grandmother's information on my father's side, who I contacted and was able to get my grandmother, my father's mother's info. And so that's kind of how that piece started to come back, where I could even connect my father's side of the family and really get some answers from him as to what happened.
So you were staying with your maternal grandmother? You were staying with your mother's mother?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, oh wow. I mean, it's interesting that you say you also now work in this field, because do you feel, because in some respects, some of the things that I go through, especially when I'm working with other people who have gone through them, I almost feel like, well, maybe God had me go through that to prepare me to work with them. Do you feel like maybe God had you go through that to be able to now work with these children you're working with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been in the mental health field, actually next month to make 6 years. And ironically, I started out in the field in substance abuse. So I was working with adults who, were my mom. They lived the same life that she was living. And so I remember being able to help them from a child standpoint, because a lot of them had children, and of course they wanted to repair those relationships, and I had to help them understand it from a kid's point of view, and the same when I did get to work, live with my mom and kind of help her through her situation, I had to teach my clients that, your children really just want you to own it.
Right.
They don't necessarily care about who, what, when, where, and why. They just want you to own the fact that, hey, mom and dad not being a part of your life had a ripple effect. It caused this.
Right.
And so a lot of my clients didn't understand that. It was kind of like, well, why can't they just get over it and forgive? And for me, I used to have to say it because they want you to own it. You haven't owned the fact that, hey, my child's angry.
Right.
And it's because I wasn't here.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Because again, I see it, and I'll tell you, and I've said it on the air before. I was I'm probably the last person on earth that would ever think that I would get divorced. I mean, I just knew that whenever I got married the first time that it truly was going to be till death do us part. And I just knew, but somewhere along the way things went wrong. But the impact that it had on my kids was astronomical. And just as you just said, in terms of what's going on in the kids' mind, I honestly believe goes on there. I was listening to something one day when the author says, in a kid's mind, because again, I'm thinking the same way you just said, okay, look, it is what it is. Let's process, let's work it through, let's get over it, so forth and so on. But in a kid's mind, they were saying they don't want to have to deal with, from a divorce perspective or a separation perspective, of having to go to dad's house for 2 days and stay with mom for 5 and visitation and certain holidays. They want both their parents in the same house. That's what kids want. Kids want mom and dad in the same house. They don't want to have to be dealing with visitation and I go with dad now. And as you just said, dad's other woman and so forth and so on. Kids don't want to be bothered with that. But as adults, we really don't kind of think that way. And then the other thing is trying to help kids understand, well, it was an adult thing. It really wasn't about, you didn't cause it. Did you ever feel, because if you didn't know them, you couldn't have felt that way, that you were the cause of them doing what they were doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely did. And again, I think that goes back to me just feeling different, feeling like, okay, now that I know that this is one of the reasons why they're not here, then I start to have those questions of, well, what's wrong with me? Why was I not good enough that you would want to not do drugs and you would want to not drink and you would want to not go to prison? For a very, very long time, I felt that way. And honestly, it wasn't until about 5 years ago that feeling stopped. And I'll tell you why, because 5 years ago, I was in a position where I had to actually take care of my mother. She got really, really sick out there doing drugs. And I remember getting a phone call from the hospital, because one thing about my mom, she gonna call. She might not call me directly, but she's going to get somebody to call, especially when she's in that place where she's feeling ashamed. She's definitely going to get somebody to call to let me know that she's okay. And I remember getting a phone call, and at the time I was living in North Carolina, and she was in New York. And I remember a doctor calling me, and they pretty much said, if you don't come get your mother, she's going to die. And so at the time, I'm in my mid-20s, so imagine how I'm like, what? Regardless of her not raising me, that's still my mom. I wouldn't be here if it had not been for her. And so I remember feeling conflicted, because I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, I don't want to go get this woman. I don't even know her, But then on the other hand, I always say it's the inner me. My inner child was like, but that's mom. How do you not show up for mom? And so I remember feeling conflicted and praying about it, and I'm like, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, if this is your will, make the provision. And I kid you not, I remember I was going to leave on a Friday, and I was like, I don't got the money, nothing. And I remember down to the final hour, one of my friends who knew the situation called me, and she was like, sis, I don't know where this extra money came from, but come get this money and go get your mother.
Wow. I'm not surprised. As a believer, I'm not surprised because I know that was God, but at the same time, it's just the timing is always there. And so at some point in that dialogue and conversation with yourself, you thought about not going, in terms of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm trying to recap what I thought I just heard. At some point were you saying, well, you know what, I'm not going because she wasn't there for me, I don't want to be there for her, or was it kind of like, know what? Oh, I did hear right. Okay.
Yeah, I always tell people it was kind of like my Moses moment. When if you know the story when God told Moses to go back to Egypt.
I do.
People, and how he had that back and forth with him. Like, what are you talking about? Do you know what happened there? That I always tell people that moment was my Moses moment. It was literally me going back and forth with God. Hold up, time. Did you know that this woman left when I was 2. I don't even know her. I barely remember her being in my life. Now you want me to go back and get her? Are you kidding me? And I remember going back and forth with him. And finally I was just like, okay, I'm going to be obedient, And so I drove up to New York, and I got my mom, and she was probably in the worst shape ever. And I got her back to North Carolina, and honestly, when we were in the car coming back, and she was just so tired, so she slept the whole time. I remember just crying, and I kept saying, God, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I could hear him tell me, it's not going to be in my strength or my might, but in his strength and his might.
Right.
That I'm going to get through it. And so I was like, okay. And it was rough. You talk about the 2-year-old in you coming out in your 20s when your mom's around. Like, and I talk about that in my book, but, like, it was rough. I was probably the most unstable person emotionally because now I'm face to face with the person that I've had this resentment for, this anger for, this hatred for all these years, and she's living with me. And I have to face her. And at the time, I didn't know how to face her, so I did what my 25-year-old self would do. I would get on the phone with family members and talk about her like a dog, like she wasn't standing right there. Like, I did all these little things, but looking back, that was just the inner child in me that had been bottling up this stuff for all these years coming out. And she didn't care how she came out. She was just like, I'm bursting at the seams because now I get a chance to tell this woman who left me that I'm mad at her and that I'm angry at her and that she hurt me. And so I really, it was a process because my mom, she kind of had the notion of why can't we just be one big happy family?
Well, see, that's what I was saying earlier. In the adult mind, that is kind of what you're thinking in terms of things happen. So, okay, but from the child mind or the person who feels like they were victimized from it, it's not that. And you said something earlier about the whole thing when you were in school, feeling different. So forth. Your teacher wouldn't know that unless you told him or her. So your teacher, and what I'm saying all that to say, teachers have no clue what the 10 or 15, 20, 25, 30 kids in their class individually are going through and may be driving why they act the way they act or process the way they process. And so, I mean, your story, even though I'm very familiar with it because I see it every day, just to hear somebody say it is fascinating to me. It really is. I'm sitting here like riveted because trying to get into the psychology of what is going through the mind of a child who is dealing with these type of issues. And I'm glad you're bringing that out for those in the listening audience, because I'm quite sure there's somebody out there in the listening audience who either has gone through or is going through or knows someone who is going through the very thing that you are describing. I had a parent, one of the most asinine statements I'd ever heard was, because the child is a very busy child. And the mother says, I don't understand why X is like that because I was doing the same drugs when I was carrying his sister and she didn't turn out that way. And I was sitting there mouth open, like, I just couldn't believe I had heard her say what she had just said. Like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? You just said, I can't believe he's that way because I was doing the same drugs when I was carrying his sister and she didn't turn out that way. It was mind blowing. And so to hear from you in terms of being a child and coming up that way absolutely is fascinating me. So how did you deal with that as a child? Because I know we're working our way up to the writing. That's where I'm going with this. When did it click for you? Well, I got to do something to get this out.
I think that it clicked for me again, probably around the age of 8 or 9 when it was kind of told, but not really told that, okay, they're gone because this is the issue. A lot of times I really found out actually overhearing conversation, that, okay, we got to get ready to tell Leah and her brother and her sister that this is why their mom is not around or this is why their dad is not around. And so, but again, I was always writing. My grandmother, she'll say, I can remember you writing when you were about 4. Like she was like, you always had a pen or a pencil or a crayon. I can remember that. You always had that. Always drawing something, writing something. And so she was like, I knew when I told her that I was writing a book, she was like, I knew that day was going to come because that was you as a kid. And so I was always writing. As far as I can remember, I was always writing, always writing something, and I don't think that I realized that it was releasing pain for me at the time, but it was just my outlet. A lot of kids, especially today, fighting is their outlet.
Right.
Cursing is their outlet. Some of them are even doing drugs now. Writing was my outlet. It was my go-to that when I, just needed to express the anger, the hurt, the pain, I wrote.
But see, again, you're hitting the nail right on the head in terms of at least you had the wherewithal to have that alternative way of getting it out. I'm going to say again, the majority of the children that are angry of what you're describing, their first choice is fighting. I mean, that's why I deal with so many kids who are fighting, who, like you said, the least little thing gets them going and touched off, and they resort to fighting, compared with you now saying, okay, I'm going to take this to my journal. Mm. So, and we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday whenever I was talking to you, in terms of, and I'm quite sure whenever you were like 8, 9, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But was it like a release for you? I mean, I know we talked yesterday about of it being therapy. I call it a catharsis.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, how would you feel after now writing?
Honestly, even now, it's a freedom that for me that when it comes to writing, like I got that out. I got that off my chest. I can recall that there were times like if I wrote something that was like full of curse words, I would write it and then crumble it up. Because
that's right.
My way of like, okay, I got it out, now throw it in the trash. But yeah, that was therapy. It still is therapy. Writing is still therapy for me. I think what made me go a different route was I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And so if you know anything about Queens, New York, it has its rough part. And so I grew up in the rough parts of Queens, New York. And so I saw, homelessness and there's areas where drugs was being dealt. And I saw prostitution. I saw these things growing up. And so for me, it was my way of escaping in the imaginary world. Writing was, but it was also my way of saying to myself, I can't be this. This can't be my life. And so I knew eventually that writing could open doors for me. I even going through high school, college, my schooling, teachers would always tell me, like, you have an amazing gift. Like, you can write. Like, you write amazingly when it was essay times and things like that. Even when I was penning my book, my publisher was like, you're a storyteller. I don't think you realize that, but you are an amazing storyteller. And so I knew eventually it would open some kind of doors. I don't think I ever envisioned the author in me, honestly. But I just knew that writing was a gift, that God had given me this gift to write. And I was willing to use it and do with it what he wanted me to do with it.
So now, one of my main messages when I talk to kids that are in similar situations is exactly kind of sort of what you just said in terms of using the situation for fuel to ensure that, my situation may be jacked up now, but I'm going to do everything I can do to make sure that when I become an adult or as I get older, that I'm not going to wind up in this boat. I think, again, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but I think I heard you say that was exactly what happened for you. How did you now wind up using it for fuel instead of going into a pity party?
Well, you know what? I think I had pity party moments, but again, I think that I looked at my surroundings. I looked at what, addiction had done to my family. Because my mom and my dad were not the first in their families to ever get caught out in drugs and incarceration. It had been happening for years in my family on both sides. So I looked at that. I looked at my surroundings. I looked at just where I was growing up, how I was growing up. And I just got this determination in me from a young age that this was not going to be my life, that I was not going to go down the same path as everyone else, that I got this resolve of it is with me, that I'm going to position myself so that when I have kids, and I don't have any yet, that they would never know what it's like to not have a mother, because I'm going to be the best mother that I could possibly be, and I even look at my kids that I have as clients, like I look, they look to me as a second mom. So I always think about them and what, I needed. And so I encourage them to journal. I have 2 girl clients, and that's what they love to do. And when we have our sessions, we're journaling, talking and journaling, journaling and talking, because I encourage that. And I even tell my clients' parents, like, encourage them to write, because writing is therapy. It allows them to get it out, even if they don't know how to say it verbally, at least they can write it, and it'll help them to get it out. And so for me, I just paid attention to the surroundings. I saw what it was like growing up in the hood of Queens, New York, what it was, drugs was doing, and not just to my family, but I can recall having a few friends in the neighborhood who was like, yeah, my dad, he been in prison since I was 2, or, so I saw this epidemic, and it was like, this can't be me.
Wow.
And when I get up out of here, I have to do something to change this situation, not just for me, but for those that are coming up behind me. And so I believe that's where God is taking me in my writing, not to just produce books, but to build a platform for others. I remember having a conversation just recently with someone that I admire, and she said to me, you have a platform. She said, because what did happen to those children who were affected by the crack epidemic that hit in the 70s and 80s? We don't even know. She was like, and you happen to be one of them that came up out of that environment and are doing well. So she was like, you have to realize that you are the voice for them, for those that were affected by it, and probably have never even thought to tell their stories. So, I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly, because I really do want to be a voice for those kids that never was able to say, mommy and daddy hurt me. They weren't there, and this is how my life panned out. I thank God every day that I did turn out okay, because there's many of us that haven't, that are following right in their footsteps.
That's correct, because you actually had the opportunity to break the cycle or break the pattern. Do you ever get into a situation when you're talking with your children or working with the children, your clients, whenever you share with them, when I was your age, this happened to me? I mean, there's this old song, or rather, it's a saying in church, and now that someone has made a song out, it's called, I'm glad I don't look like what I've been through. Do they ever look at you and get shocked? Wow, Miss Leah, you? What?
Absolutely. I can recall. I had a young adolescent early on in my career, and I can recall he was being raised by a single dad. His mom had left, and he had all these anger issues. And I was teaching anger management at the time, and I can recall him, looking at me crazy when I told him, like, I've been where you've been. Because one thing I've learned about kids working in mental health is they really just want to know that somebody understands, that somebody recognizes that, okay, this is why I act the way that they act. I don't think any child wakes up and says,
right,
I'm just going to go to school and act a fool today.
Right.
I think a lot of times it is the fact that they haven't learned coping skills. They haven't learned how to process. And depending on who's raising them, they may be dealing with their own anger and issues towards the person that, especially if it's like grandma or auntie, there's some resentment from their end of, well, my daughter or my son should have been taking care of them.
Right.
So you got them not processing with the kids, then nobody else is talking about it. So now these children are internalizing all of this like I did, and then you want me to navigate through this world? Like how? How do I navigate through this world? So the first thing I know to do is get angry. The first thing I know to do is lash out. The first thing I know to do is fight, because nobody has taught me anything different. Nobody has said to me, let's process this. Let's teach you a coping skill. Nobody has said that to me. So, of course, I'm going to go to school and act a fool, because when I'm home, we're acting like there's not a pink elephant in the room.
Right. And so you touched on something, especially, and again, I didn't go through it, but I am extremely familiar with it because I deal with children with that, and grandparents and on a daily basis. And for many of the grandparents, some of that negative energy may be coming across for so many different reasons, in terms of the guilt associated with their children being whatever they were. And then as now a grandparent, I'm raising my grandchildren when it's really not fair to me. At this point, I should be able to do my own thing in life because I already raised my children. I don't feel like I did a good job raising them. That's why I'm stuck with it. I mean, it's so many different things that goes on in situations like that. And you're right. All that energy now is in the house. And now the child comes to school and we're expecting him or her to focus on 2 + 2 = 4. And then when they don't focus on 2 + 2 = 4 and they're hitting each other and calling each other names, we wonder why. Do you deal in terms of in the school system or whatever system you're working with teachers and trying to help them understand and have compassion? I'm not necessarily saying excuse, but at least be able to understand and show some compassion, because I agree with you. I honestly believe that most children just want to be understood and heard as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I do. And I think that's my job there, is just to kind of get these teachers to realize that we're not making excuses for them, but just have, like you said, have some compassion. It can't be easy to be 6 years old, raised by a guardian because mommy out there doing drugs, daddy ain't nowhere to be found. It can't be easy, and then I always tell teachers, you don't know the messages or the story that child is getting.
Right.
Because a lot of times, especially in the Black community, we live under that mantra of what happens in this house stays in this house. And so, they're experiencing a lot when they get home, but they ain't got no outlet because grandma or G-ma or ma or pop or whatever you want to call them is saying, all right, now, don't take this outside this house. Right?
That's right.
They get outside this house, but you want me to be a normal functioning kid.
Right.
And I don't know what normal and functioning is because I'm living in a house full of dysfunction.
And see, it's interesting you brought it up because, let's see, today is Saturday. We were out Thursday and Friday due to weather. Wednesday, I had a meeting with some children, and the student assistant coordinator was there, as well as a couple of parents. Matter of fact, one of the parents, it was interesting because the children that I was dealing with had an opportunity to hear both sides of the spectrum. There was a young man who got suspended. His parents came back with him, or his guardians, or whoever it was. But the mother shared how she had been in prison, and the gentleman who was with them, and I'm not sure what his role was or relationship, but he was with them, had shared how he was a corrections officer. So the kids got the opportunity to hear both sides of the spectrum. They got a chance to hear from a corrections officer, and they got a chance to hear from the woman who had been in prison. And they were trying to help the children understand you don't want to go down this road. But the reason I'm sharing that is because that whole notion of what goes on in his house stays in his house came up. And what came out of that was, I get it in terms of nobody wants to go out there telling their family business. But at the same time, what the student assistance coordinator was trying to help them understand, because of that, it opens the door for a lot of nefarious activities to go on in the home, such as molestation, such as rape, such as abuse, such as so forth and so on. Because kids are going under that. What's done in this house has to stay in this house. And what happens is, not only does it stay in the house, it stays inside of the child. And it's bottled up in there. And again, back to the anger thing or the depression or whatever, folks are wondering what's wrong with this kid, not realizing how much is inside of the child. Let's go back to that whole statement you just said about what goes on in the house, stay in the house. Talk to me a little bit about that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I believe that is a horrible thing. It does such a disservice, not just to the children, but the family structure altogether. Because again, we're internalizing it as a kid. And if we never find an outlet, then we become young adults that keep internalizing. And then we become adults that keep internalizing. And so we take every little thing personal because we're taught that we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to let, the neighbors know that we got a molestation happening in the home. We're not supposed to let, our friends and family know that we got some domestic violence in the home. We're not supposed to be letting our school and our classmates know that mom's boyfriend is touching me inappropriately. But it's happening. And it's happening, and it's destroying families, but it's also destroying the self-esteem and the mentality of our young people because they don't have an outlet. Because we're taught, don't you tell nobody. I was taught that. Don't you tell nobody your mom is a drug addict. Don't you tell nobody your daddy done been in prison. Don't you tell, when domestic violence was happening in my home, and I was seeing it at the age of 9, 10 years old. Don't you tell nobody. But at 9 or 10 years old, that was the beginning of shaping what I was supposed to look for in a person. So then, in my teens, when I hook up with the dude that's beating me, now I got this pattern continuing because at 9 or 10, I was seeing it and was told, well, don't you tell nobody. So now at 19 years old, when I hook up with somebody and he's putting his hands on me and I'm staying in this situation for 3-4 years, I'm thinking this is love because
this is the norm, right? Like you're thinking because that's what you saw. And that's what you were told, don't tell anybody about. And and then I've had instances where it's been a situation where they did tell somebody and nobody believed them. They did tell the mother about like the situation you just described with the boyfriend or whatever touching them inappropriately. They did tell the mother and the mother took the man's side, didn't believe him. That messed the child up too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've had friends that experienced that. And you know what I've learned, Mark? Honestly, I've learned that when we track and trace these patterns and we track and trace the pathologies in these families, these are situations that have been happening for generations. Right. It just takes this one kid to actually talk up about it. I remember I was talking to a young girl who I'm mentoring right now, and, I was telling her she was expressing some of the issues that she was dealing with her mom and how they don't have this really good relationship. And I said to her, I said, track and trace it. I said, because I promise you'll see that mom probably went through the same exact things that she's putting you through. And so one thing I learned when taking care of my mom for that time that God had allowed her to be with me in North Carolina was that people can only do what they know how to do. And so I was expecting a mother to love me, to nourish me, to be all those things that mom was supposed to be. But when I tracked and traced it, my mom didn't necessarily get everything that she needed from her mom. So then we have this incapability going on where I want her to give me all this love, and affection that she didn't necessarily get from her mom. Right. So how could she give it to me? Because she doesn't know what it looks like because nobody gave it to her. Wow. And so I always tell people, track and trace it. And when I was telling that young lady, she said, you know what? Now that I think about it, my grandmother did to my mom exactly what my mom is doing to me. I said, so that's enough to help you, one, empathize with her, but also help you to forgive her. When you really realize that some of these parents are just incapable. Right. It's not that they don't want to be a mom or dad. They just don't have the tools because nobody gave them the tools. So how do I be a mother and father when I probably didn't grow up with mother and father? Grandma was probably raising me, and because grandma had this anger and the resentment and the feeling of, well, I didn't raise mine, so why do I have to now raise my grandkids? Right. Right? And that pans out in how she parents them. Right. Right? So now I'm a mom, and I'm supposed to do what? Be great mom when nobody was great mom to me? It's amazing how the generational curses, like we call it in the Black community, passed down. That's because when you really start to look back, you're like, well, dang. Well, if I grew up with a grandmother that barely said I love you to me, then how do I expect my mama to tell me she loved me? Because she probably didn't hear it from grandma, so therefore she thinks that's love, not saying it. So then she can't embrace me as her child because nobody was embracing her when she was my age. Wow. See, in my school, every morning during the morning announcements, we end the entire building yelling as loud as they can, I am great, I am loved, and I can learn anything. That's kind of like our little, every year I change up the slogan. Every year it's always something, no,
self-affirming. It's always some type of affirmation, because I honestly believe exactly what you just said. So many of our children have no idea what love is, haven't experienced it. So I try to help them understand, okay, if you don't feel it anywhere else, I want you to feel it here in this school building. So we sign off with, I am great, I am loved, and I can learn anything. And it makes such a difference. And the other thing I try to help teachers and everybody else understand is the way the children treat me is not because I'm principal. The children treat me the way they do because of the way I treat them. I mean, Leah, when I tell you I cannot walk out of my office and get through the hallway without some child running up to give me a hug, I kid you not. I'm not exaggerating. If you were to come to a walkthrough with me, you'd see it. And it's not because I'm principal. Because the children that I deal with, they have no respect of age, title, race. They have no respect of any of that. They'll curse out the superintendent. It would not faze them based on everything that they go through at home. Because again, that's their norm. Their norm, how to handle situations, is to curse somebody out. But at the same time, when someone does show love to them, they do express it back. Some of my most challenging and cantankerous kids will still show me love back because love has been shown to them. So when I hear your story, I mean, again, it crystallizes for me so many of what my students are going through. And then in a school building, in an urban area, in a poor economic area, you get that collective negativity. In other words, you get more than one child who's having that experience. It's one thing for one child to have experience. It's another one for 300 out of 400 of them to be having it.
Yeah.
So now you get to the point, you've been journaling, you've written poems, you've gotten down your feelings and so on. Now you get to the point where you're going to put it into book format, unapologetically me. What was kind of like, how did you start that process? Or when did you make that decision?
So actually, I didn't make that decision. I always tell people that God made that for me because, so after I had that time with my mom, unfortunately, she did decide she was going to go back to doing drugs. So after I had her with me in North Carolina for about a year, and in that year, God really started to do a lot of healing in me. And I remember my spiritual father had said to me, he said, "Daughter, this wasn't even about your mom. This was about you. This was God trying to heal you. Because as long as mom was in New York and I was 9 hours away, I didn't have to deal with it.
Right.
You know, I'm in a state where don't nobody really know about me. Don't nobody know my past like that. You know, it's kind of like I'm almost like the Cheers song. You know, you want to go where everybody knows your name, but I just wanted to be somewhere where I could disconnect from New York, from that. And so that's what North Carolina was for me. And so when she had to come and I had to deal with these emotions and feeling like, why are you here? You know, this anger, all of these things that have been, detached from me from quite some time, God had to heal me from that. And I remember after she left, and my mom, she didn't tell me she was leaving or nothing. She literally got on the bus in the middle of the night while I was sleeping and left. You know, it wasn't no goodbye, no nothing. It was devastating for me. It was really like,
wow.
Okay, I took this year out of my life to help you, get you back on track. And this is what you do. And I think a lot of it, looking back, was my mom was just fearful because,
right.
You know, she had to face the child that she left.
Right.
And then two, she has all these health issues and all these doctors telling her, listen, you got to stay off the drugs because within 5-6 years tops, you're going to be dead. You know, so it was not I need to make a change for me. It was more like a forced change, okay, I got to stay off the drugs because they're telling me I'm going to die. But not a heart change where it's no, I really need to stay off these drugs. So that's what made her leave. But so I remember going back to, writing. And in the midst of me writing, I heard the Lord just tell me, you got to tell your story. And so Unapologetically Me was actually going to be another book. I was going to call it A Daughter's Unconditional Love for Her Mother because I was going to talk about that year that I had with my mom. And when I started writing it, I got shifted because the Holy Spirit said to me clear as day, you cannot tell her story until you first tell yours. And so I was like, whoa, wait a minute, like, hello, you forgot where you know where I've been, right? You know the mess that I've been in, you know the path that I've been on. And so I kind of was hesitant, but I got obedient. And so I started penning it about a year and a half before it came out. And it was really therapy for me because I not only talked about my mom, I talked about going through multiple sexual assaults. I talked about finding love in the wrong places, ending up in a abusive relationship, losing a child. I went through a pregnancy that ended up in a miscarriage, and just all these different losses that I had experienced, but how through counseling and my relationship with God, I made it through. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I'm a huge advocate for counseling, because I going back to the whole what happens in this house stays in this house. What I learned is that if you don't deal with it, it's going to deal with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one way or the other, it is going to be dealt with.
Right. And so that year that I spent with my mom, and I talk about it in my book, I call it my mirroring moment. It was almost as if God was showing me through my mom what my life would become if I did not deal with what he was asking me to do. If I did not deal with the abandonment, if I did not deal with the rejection, the hurt, the anger, the pain. And it was so interesting because I remember the moment that I got freed. It was a Sunday afternoon after church. I was sitting in my car with my mother, and I remember just asking her, like, why? Like, why did you leave? Why did you leave? What made you leave when I was 2? Like, why? And I remember her saying to me that at her age, at 17, she had been molested. And that how while she was molested, she had no outlet because the people that she told didn't believe her. And so she wound up turning to marijuana, which turned to crack cocaine. And she got hooked. And that was her life ever since. And my mom said the most ironic thing. She said, I always said that when I had children, especially girls, that I was going to protect them so that they would never ever experienced a molestation. And I remember telling my mom that I had went through a rape. And she cried and she said, I just wanted to be able to protect you. And I said, Mom, how can you protect me or my sister when no one was there to protect you? You can only do
That's right.
what you know. And it was so freeing for me in that moment because in that moment was when I realized that my mom's addiction had nothing to do with me.
Right.
The whole time that I internalized it, like, what was wrong with me? Why did my mom have to leave me? Why did, my dad have to leave? The reality was it was their demons. It was their issues. And I was just internalizing it. So it wasn't until I had that conversation that I got healed and God freed me from the burden of carrying that I've been carrying since I was a kid. Now I'm in my 20s. Can't love nobody, can't talk to nobody, don't want to be close to nobody, keeping everybody at arm's length, adult. Because this whole time I've been internalizing the fact that I'm not good enough, that I'm not loved, that I'm not wanted because mom and dad weren't there. Now I get to hear from the horse's mouth that she went through a molestation.
Right.
That put her on the path to addiction. Well, now, hey, that lets Leah off the hook because it had nothing to do with me in the first place.
And see, that's what I said earlier. The average child, because at that age, in those formative years, processing skills are not logical like an adult. The average child will assume the reason that anything happened was because of him or her. Exactly what you just said. Now, you were only 2. It's like, there's no way in the world you could have been the cause. But that's the way kids think. And they internalize that, and that brings up a whole bunch of different emotions and self-esteem issues, so forth and so on. And exactly what you just said. Now, I listened to you as you said, your mom got up in the middle of the night and just left. Now, I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, my God, this would be 20 years or however many years it was later. Didn't you feel like, oh my God, it's happened to me again. She did it when I was 2 and now I'm 22 and it's happened again.
Absolutely. The abandonment, the inner child kicked right in at the time. And it was so crazy because I was working when it happened. I was actually working when it happened. And what happened was she found her way to the emergency room and she told whatever story she told. And next thing I know, they're like discharging her with a Greyhound ticket. And it was so amazing to me because I'm like, this particular emergency room in Durham, North Carolina, I'm like, I ain't never known them to get nobody no Greyhound tickets. They don't even give nobody $2 to get on the bus when they discharge you. So, like, you know, it was so crazy to me. And she was gone. And it was like probably maybe 4 months that I even heard from her again. And, you know, it was heartbreaking. But the beautiful thing in it is that in that year and going through counseling and getting healed and staying in my word and just really allowing God to heal me, by the time I spoke to her after she had left, I was in such a peaceful place that there wasn't even an anger from my mom anymore. If anything, I learned to be able to empathize and sympathize with her.
Right.
Because I understood now what she was battling with. And so even now, and she still battles with drugs, you know, when I talk to her, it's not a place of, what do you want? Why are you calling me?
Right.
It's now a place of, are you okay?
Right.
You know, take care of yourself out there. You know, I love you. Praying with her. And so it's amazing how God can do that for you, because when I was a kid, I probably never even saw that. Like, I never saw that moment, you know, and even in my 20s, like, I was okay with, as long as she stay in New York, I'm cool.
Right.
Because when she get in my space, we're going to have an issue, you know, and God really had to be like, and that's why I'm going to bring her in your space, because now you got to deal with this stuff that
that's
you
right.
trying to deal with.
That's right.
You know, you're trying to go around the process, and I'm trying to tell you can't go around it.
You got to go through
the process. You got to go through.
You got to go through.
And so that was it for me. And so after she left, and I started writing, unapologetically me, you know, I really I struggled with it because I was like, Lord, like, this is, I don't want to tell all of this. But I knew that it was bigger than me. If I knew it was going to be bigger than me, and I tell you, I didn't realize how big it was until probably a few weeks ago. I got a message from a reader who said to me, she was like, as I'm writing you, I'm in tears because I just want to thank you for this story, because she said, I too took care of my mom. She was an alcoholic. My mom died when I was 37 years old.
Wow.
And I remember from the time I was 8, I was taking care of her. She said, and I too felt like, you know, I take care of her, I cook, I clean, I make sure she's all right. Like, there's no way that I can have this anger and this resentment for my mom. She said, and it wasn't until I read your book that I said, oh my God, I'm her. Because when you talked about your anger, you talked about your resentment, you talked about your hatred for this person, you know, forget on the other end of the spectrum, she's mom and she's like hero to you.
Right.
She's like, I'm reading it and I'm in tears because I'm like, I'm her. And so she was like, I just want to thank you because it opened up the womb enough for me to heal. And now I can go through the healing. And that's when I realized, like, man, my story is so many other stories.
Right.
People's story. And it's bigger than me. And I think about that all the time. Like, if I had hesitated, if I had said, nah, I'm not going to write this book, that woman would still be trapped in
right.
the pain of her situation, because she didn't realize that she even felt it.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I want you to hang on to that point, because that's going to be my question when I come back from doing what I need to do to turn the hour. Because I told you yesterday, the time goes by very quickly. We've actually crossed into the 8:00 hour. So let me do what I have to do for that. And then I want you to hang on to that very thought where you were, because that is one of our questions that I generally do ask, especially with interviews like this. So stay right there, listening audience. I hope you've been with us the entire time, but certainly by now, if you haven't shared, get on all your social media sites and tell somebody to log on to gobrave.org. gobrave.org and tune in to this. It is a powerful one. It is one that needs to be heard, a story that is being shared, and we never know who's listening, who we might be touching, just as Leah just said in terms of the reader reading her book. So let somebody know we're on the air, and we shall return in a couple of seconds.
WPSC, Wayne, New Jersey. On the radio, 88.7 FM. Online, gobrave.org. A tune-in radio station, part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network.
Broadcasting live from Hobart Hall in Wayne, New Jersey.
This is
The Innovative.
I think they're really unique.
The Fearless.
They have awesome variety.
The Kick-Ass.
I love Brave New Radio.
The Sensational.
I've never heard anything like it.
This is the one and only Brave New Radio.
Here's your North Jersey weather report.
All right now we're still holding steady at 8 degrees, working our way up to a high of 11 degrees. Now we're going to drop to a low. Like I told you last hour, it was a -3. Now it's -2. So we're going the other way. But it's going to be sunny today. Tomorrow, well, we gained a degree tomorrow. It's going to be 20 as a high, 12 degrees as a low, mostly sunny. And then on Monday, 31 as a high, 28 as a low. Expect snow showers in the afternoon. On Tuesday, 38 as a high, 16 as a low, partly cloudy. And rounding out the forecast on Wednesday, 35 as a high, 29 as a low, expected to be partly cloudy. As I open up the show, baby, it's cold outside.
WP 88.7 FM. Brave New Radio. Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed. You are listening to Brave New Radio, WP 88.7 FM, and we web stream around the world on gobrave.org, GOBRAVE.org. So someone in Africa, someone in Paris, someone in Hawaii, someone in China, someone anywhere in the world, as long as they have internet connectivity and they're able to log on to gobrave.org, can hear this interview. And if for those who did not rise early on our end, I do record the show and it will be on my YouTube site before the weekend is out, so that everybody will get an opportunity to hear this powerful story. Sadly, it's not an unfamiliar story. And as Leah just said, many people are having a similar experience. Now, many times you hear us talk on the show, it's what some might say who are unbelievers. The talk may be unfamiliar to them, or it's believer talk or what have you. But when I say that, I'm saying, Leah, many times what you were just describing is the trick of the enemy. We know who the enemy is. The trick of the enemy is to make people feel like they're the only one in the world ever to have gone through or is going through what they're going through. So when someone now comes across a book like yours, it is a release to say, oh my God, someone else has gone through that too. Do you ever, I mean, you just shared one, but do you have other experiences like that where people say, I had no idea and thank you so much, because had you not shared your story, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, so forth and so on?
Absolutely. Actually, one of my readers is a good friend of mine, and we actually grew up in the same neighborhood. And I remember she reached out to me, and she said, oh, my God, we literally live a block from each other, and I would have never known you were going through this. She said, because every time I saw you, you didn't seem like that kid. Like, you always had a smile on your face. You always seemed like everything was well. And then I read your story, and I'm like, how did I grow up a block away from this person and not even know that she was experiencing any of this? And so all the time I get people that say, thank you. You know, thank you for talking about domestic violence. Thank you for talking about sexual assault. Thank you for talking about, you know, the effect that addiction and incarceration has, you know, on families. You know, because I think a lot of times we believe that addiction, or at least we're programmed to believe that addiction and incarceration is just the addict's issue. No, it's a family issue, because it's not
absolutely right.
Addict. It's affecting mom, and it's affecting grandma and auntie and uncle and kids. It's affecting the entire family, and so it's not just the addict's issue. It's a family issue, and until we really realize that, and stop trying to make it just the addict's problem, but realize that, no, the addict, yeah, they have a problem, but guess what? It's trickling down to their kids, because now we got kids growing up without mom and dad. You know, the incarceration, the prison system, and I used to work in the prison system and in a male prison system, and I saw firsthand what these kids were going through not being able to see Dad. Because whether we want to believe it or not, our parents are a big, huge part of who we become.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Whether we want to believe that or not. And so many of us don't make it out. Many of us stay stuck. Many of us don't. And I happen to be one of the ones who did. So for me, it's a platform to be the voice for those that ain't got one. And it's me saying, listen, you can make it out. Is it going to take work? Yep. Because I truly believe that if God did not allow me to experience that year with my mom prior to me writing that book, I probably would not have ended up where I am today. Almost finished, done with my master's. I'll be a master's graduate student graduating in September of this year.
All right. God bless. All right. Go ahead, girl. I know that's right. But I mean, so you talked about it a little bit earlier in terms of the title. How did you come up with, because it was supposed to be one thing and then you decided on Unapologetically Me. How did you, what is that? What did you want folks to look at that title and get out of that?
Honestly, the title came to me in prayer. And I can recall God saying to me, tell your story with no apologies. So that's where Unapologetically Me came from. I really wanted people to get that, be you with no apologies, no matter what your past look like, no matter what your present day situation is, because one thing I know for sure is that it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Absolutely. And
so that's what I wanted people to take from that. Look at a young lady who started jacked up. She grew up without mom, dad, prison system then took over the family, addiction took over the family, but now here she is at almost 31 years old. She is soon to hold a master's degree, writing more books, engaged to be married. All these things that are happening that, guess what, statistically wasn't supposed to happen.
That's right.
Because statistics said, no, you can't be, coming from a broken home and make it out.
No, not just statistics. That's what people say, because I get all the time. People say, Mr. Medley, I don't know why you're wasting your time down there at that school. Those children are only going to rise as far as they see. They only go as high as what they see at home and in the streets. So I don't know why you're down there wasting your time with that, because they're not going to go any further than that. And my comeback always is, yeah, but you know what? For 6 hours, they see another side as well. They also see teachers who come in from different communities. They also see people of different color. They see people who own houses. They see people who own cars. They see people who have degrees, who have education, who are trying to be something. They see that too. So why would they now not try to rise to that? So to your point, you're absolutely right. It's not just statistics that say that. There are people that say that.
Because I heard it. Oh, I love the phrase, oh, she's never going to be like nothing but her mama.
Exactly.
She's going to be like, oh, he's going to be just like his daddy. I heard it in my neighborhood. I heard it growing up. And so for me, it was, See, one thing about me, and my fiance laughs about it, I love when people tell me what I can't do or what I can't.
Exactly.
I want to prove you wrong. And so hearing those things growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, her mama a crackhead, so she just going to end up, nope. Because I use that to say, no, that's not what you're not going to be. That's why I can probably say at 30, almost 31, I have no kids. Because I told myself when I was a teenager, you're not going to be nobody's baby mama. You're going to be a wife first. That was me saying, no, I break this thing. Because my mom and dad never got married.
Right.
So I'm not going to be like my mother. I ain't going to go down that path of having babies out of wedlock. I'm going to be a wife first. And and people that didn't think that I could do it now look and be like, dang, we're going to be 31 at the end of this month. And she ain't had no children yet. Nope, because I promised myself, if you don't do anything, keep that promise to yourself, Leah, that you're going to be a wife first before you ever have children.
I know that's right.
I want people to see that, yes, I started rough.
Right.
But that does not mean that it has to end rough. My spiritual dad used to always tell me, he used to say, daughter, take a bad memory and make it beautiful. Take that negative thing, that thing that you thought that you could never get over, and use it to make it beautiful. And that's what I did with
Absolutely.
without my parents. We're going through a rape. I took these negative things that the enemy, like we say, tried to use to say, I'm going to stop her. And I said, nope, I'm going to turn this thing around. And now I get to sit on your show, and I can broadcast to the world that, guess what? I started jacked up.
Right.
But I ain't got to stay there.
And see, and that's a redemptive message. That is a message for all to like, never give up. Smokey Norville has a song that says, don't quit. And it's like, never, regardless. And I know I'm not telling anybody it's going to be easy. I don't try, like I said earlier, I'm not Pollyannish. I'm not naive. I'm not going to try to fool anybody into believing that what we're talking about is going to be easy, because it's not. But at the same time, what we're saying is it's doable. And again, biblically, if you look in the story of Joseph, at the end, he says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. So a lot of times these things, even though in the beginning may look like it was for evil, but it is, and it's a strange way. Don't get me wrong, because, there's that old saying too, God works in mysterious ways. It may be a strange way, but in the end, whoever was going through, because you heard Leah say, I couldn't go around it. Whoever was going through actually winds up coming out the better for it.
Yeah. And I can attest to that, because honestly, I was just telling my fiance this the other day. I said, you could not have told me at 29, 30 years old that not only would I be a published author, but I would have the platform that I had. Because even though I had the tenacity and the determination to get up out of the situation, I don't think I even saw that far ahead. I just knew that I wanted out. So to see where I am now it's mind blowing for me, because I'm like, this is Leah. This is the conversations that she has, whether she on the radio or she with her friends, but this is her. I live in my truth every day.
Right.
And what I try to get people to understand about being unapologetically you is, guess what? The enemy can't hold you to it anymore if you live in your truth. See, that's what he loves to do. He loves to play in our minds and with our emotions.
That's right.
He loves to throw those things in our face like, your mama wasn't there, But if I live in that truth, if I get healed, if I do the work, because like I tell anybody, it's open heart surgery when you're trying to get healed, when you're trying to deal with these issues that's dealing with you. Yeah, it's open heart surgery, and it hurts. And the thing about open heart surgery, when God puts you through it, he don't give you no pain relief and no anesthesia. So you have to feel it. Right? You got to go through. You got to feel these emotions.
That's right.
And it's not fun. But if you make it on the other side of that thing, man, now you get to live in this freedom of, yep, so what? My mama is a drug addict.
Right.
So what? My daddy was alcoholic and incarcerated. So what? Now you can't get me there.
Well, the other thing is,
a new tactic.
Right. Especially especially when you put it in print like that and you're talking on the air like you're doing now, you get a chance to own your own story. It's not like somebody else can be gossiping about you. It's not somebody to try to shame you by telling you what you already know. You telling them. Right. So nobody can't run up to you saying, ooh, Leah, your mama was a drug addict. Ooh, Leah, your daddy was in prison. Mm-hmm. They're not telling you that. You telling them.
Right. And it's funny because me and one of my friends just the other day, Mark, we was talking about, if you're familiar with the movie 8 Mile, and we were talking about that scene where Eminem in the rap battle pretty much owns his own story to his opponent. And so he drops the mic and he says, here, tell somebody what they don't know about me or whatever. And so we were talking about it, and I said, isn't that how life works? Like when you get to a place where you can own your own story,
right?
It's almost like you're throwing it in the enemy face. Now here,
right?
That's something they don't know about me.
That's absolutely right. So, unapologetically me. What's up next? What's your next product? We're coming down. We're winding down to the last few minutes of the interview. What's up next?
So I'm releasing a new book. It's coming out early 2018 called The Courage to Win. And so Courage to Win really is my inspirational message to people that it does take courage to win. We are all winners at this thing called life, but it's going to take courage. It's going to take courage to keep going even when life is trying to defeat you, even when things are trying to knock you down, to keep going. So it's coming out early 2018. So be on the lookout for that. I'm also, I plan to write a open letter to incarceration later this year, because I feel like that's a topic that many people don't talk about. And I never really fully talk about my father in my first book. And so that book will definitely deal with what it was like being the daughter of an incarcerated father and growing up without him.
Well, you know what? The interesting thing in terms of these various issues, if you will, is that every family is touched by it one way or the other. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the immediate family, but there are family members somewhere along the way. In other words, I share with kids all the time. I said, I understand the prison thing. I didn't have my immediate family members in jail, but I do have cousins who've gone to jail. It's like, I get the drug thing because I've had cousins who've dealt in drugs. I get the homosexual and the gay thing because I have cousins and other family members who are gay or homosexual. So it's not as if these issues are like somebody else or over there. They are one way or the other somewhere along the line in every last one of our families. So it's almost like those with stones can't really live in glass houses, because truth of the matter is we all live in a glass house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that now, especially now, because we are starting to really talk about mental health issues and mental health awareness is becoming is on the rise. These conversations have to be happening. And if I can use my platform to have these conversations, to shine the light on addiction, shine the light on sexual assault, incarceration, all these things, then that's what I'm going to do, because it has to happen, because otherwise we're going to keep seeing what we've been seeing.
Absolutely.
Young people going down the wrong path.
Absolutely. Well, we have come down to the end. What I always do is I shut my microphone off and allow my guest to promote. He or she can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount. So you can talk about book signings, appearances, how folks can get in touch with you, how they can get your book, where they can get your book. You can say anything except the cost of the book. But anything short of that, I'm going to turn my mic off and you have the opportunity to promote or shout out or do whatever you'd like to do for the next few minutes.
Awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, my name is Leah Forney. You can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook at leahm.forney. I'm on Instagram at I am Leah Michelle, LinkedIn at Leah Forney. You can find my book in Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, iTunes. If you're in the California area, I have copies of my book currently being sold at Pipe and Thumple Bookstore in Lomita, California. So you can go out there and get copies of my book there. If you want to email me, shoot me an email at authorleahmforney@gmail.com. Thank you again for having me on the show, Mr. Mark. And what I would say to anybody going through any of the things that I talk about, do the work, go through the process. Again, you can't go around it. You have to go through it, get healed, and then take that negative thing, take that thing that has hurt you the most, and make it something beautiful. Go out and help somebody else. Change somebody else's life. Change the direction of somebody else's life. And I promise you, when you get on the other side of this thing, it is going to be the most rewarding and most freeing moment of your life, because now you can be unapologetically you with no baggage, and you can live in your truth. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Well, God bless you as well. Thank you so much for rising early to appear with me this morning. It has been a wonderful way to kick off 2018, because it is a message of hope. It is a message of no matter how you start, particularly if you started bad, that how it can end up good. Now, that also works the reverse. You could start out very good and end up bad. It works both ways, because that's why, you cannot necessarily project the start of what the end is going to be, either way, whether it's good or bad. So the fact that you had a rough start and yet you've come through it and now coming out of it and God is blessing you and you're continuing now to be a blessing to others, that's, again, just shows the power of God. And so I'm looking forward to your next book. When you get that done, feel free. We'll get back on the air if I'm still on the air, which I hope to be. This is my 17th year, so I don't think I'm going anywhere. But if I'm still on the air, we'll reach out again and get you back on here for your next book. I thank Linda Miller for introducing us. Big shout outs to her. And Lestine Robinson, if you're listening. I don't think my mom is, because usually my mom is listening and she'll send me a text letting me know that she's listening. So I didn't see a text this morning. So she's going to catch the show on the YouTube channel. But because I know she's like, my mom just turned 79. So she's like, and I tell her, Mom, you don't have to get up that early. But she's, talk about a faithful listener. But I know it's cold down there in Louisville as well. So she probably slept in this morning. I don't know. Or maybe she is listening. I don't know. I just didn't see a text from her. But they're like my mom, Lestine Robinson, Linda Miller, and some others. They are faithful. So I'm shouting them out big time. And again, Linda, thank you for introducing us. And Leah, thank you for what you do. Keep doing what you're doing, because trust me when I tell you, I work with kids. Our kids need it so bad. Oh my God, they need they need somebody they can talk to and relate to and release with.
Yes. So thank you so much for having me, Mr. Mark.
All right. Have a wonderfully blessed day. Happy New Year to you, and we'll be in touch.
Same to you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.